Welcome to Glue TV. My name is Rubia Balsam. I'm founder of Studio Balsam and also for this year the co-curator of the Sticky Members of the Glue Edition, which will be held from 14th till 17th September. And we organized a Sticky Members route with 13 selected designers, makers, artists, and one of them is actually sitting next to me, Shahar Livene. Welcome. Happy to have you here.
Nice to be here.
You are one of the participating Sticky members, and you are, I would say, an award-winning conceptual material designer and researcher based in Eindhoven. You explore the intersection of nature, biology, science, and philosophy, but mainly through intuitive material experimentation. And your captivating projects utilize obscure materials such as blood, man-made fossils, to create, I would say, these narratives that transcend time and culture.
Definitely. You said
Um,
it perfect.
Thank you. Well, thank you for joining us also for this year with your amazing work. I love it. I love a lot about your concept behind of your different kind of works I've seen through the years. But like the arts, design has many disciplines, and you explained to me that you work within the discursive design. Could you explain for our audience what this entails?
Yeah, of course. So it's kind of a maybe lesser known field of design. It's quite emerging in the last few years. It sits on the same level as critical design and speculative design, which are basically a way to generate questions more than giving definite answers. So, but it expands on that. So, discursive design basically stretches like how we define objects and the utility of objects, and how goods can portray ideas which are beyond their aesthetic or their physical attributes.
Yeah, one of the things I found very interesting also about your work is it really taps into, I would say, an ecosystem of knowledge. I find it very amazing because there are so many, I would ideas that you explore I've never known about. And one of the things I find very interesting in your project is called the Forgotten Material. Can you explain to us what the project is about and uh, what the driving force of curiosity for you is in that specific project?
Yeah, definitely. So the Forgotten Material project actually was commissioned by the World Culture Museums in the Netherlands, and it's showing at this moment while I'm being interviewed. It's still showing in the Tropen Museum.
Definitely have a look.
Yes, a beautiful exhibition called Plastic Crush. And I was invited by the World Culture Museums to create a new project for that specific exhibition. In the past, I worked really with petrochemical plastics in my previous works, but why now I wanted to tap into a new story, a new narrative. I went with the curators and the conservator. We went to their depot next to Rotterdam, which was like a candy shop for me. And really, like a detective, I was looking at things that gave me some kind of a stimulation, not necessarily because I knew what they were, but more of interest. And basically, that's also what happens a lot in discursive design, that an object is inviting you to learn more about it. And one of the things I came across was this kind of blob from a natural rubber called Guttapercha, and it comes from Malaysia. And then it moved to Indonesia by the Dutch, basically. So it also speaks about the narrative and of colonialism and material flows. But what I was interested about was kind of the parallel lines, and that maybe comes to the idea of ecosystem, or like kind of connecting different subjects and seeing the similarities in them, is that this material is really hard to conserve. So the conservator of the World Culture Museum, she told me, like, me and my colleagues all over the world, we have a lot of trouble with preserving this material for our collection and for presenting. So it basically it breaks, it deforms, and we don't know what to do with it. And for me, it was very interesting because when I started reading about it, I understood that there's also kind of not really clear yet about the situation of the tree that this rubber comes from. So it moved around. It went to a certain spot in Indonesia where it's unclear how many of it left actually in nature. But there's also this idea of preserving. So should we preserve natural materials because they're supposed to break down? But also like this idea of ecological loss and loss of knowledge, loss of ideas. And now when I tell people the term gutta percha, nobody knows. Maybe a dentist.
I've never heard about this, indeed.
Yes, and maybe dentist because it's still being used sometimes a little bit in dentistry. But actually it was one of the most used materials in the 18th century. And what I thought was also very beautiful as a maybe idea of discursive design or discourse was not only about colonialism and how we move materials around, but also the tribal knowledge that was connected to it, but also how it brought us technological advances. For example, thanks to Gutta Percha, we have the internet the way it is right now, because it helped us to isolate the telegraph cables underwater. So
what amazing story is this?
Exactly. So it's like how this modest blob like encapsulates so much knowledge and so much beautiful mythologies and stories.
Yeah, and also when I hear you talking, there are two things that I notice. You are very passionate about storytelling, and there's also a sense, I think, also within your project that you are sending a certain kind of message of your role as designer within the current world.
Definitely.
I hear climate, etc. But maybe we can tap into the first thing. Is that tell us about you're driven by storytelling, and maybe also in relation to the curiosity aspect. How come?
Well, I think since childhood, I was always this kind of girl that, first of all, I was always intrigued by natural history museums. That was like my favorite places in the world. Like when I traveled with my parents and they took me to a natural history museum, I was like the happiest. But I was also this kind of, let's say, maybe a little bit of a nerd as a kid. And I was always like telling my parents, oh, I read this, I heard this. Like, I was intrigued by those kind of small stories and that people are not necessarily aware of. And what I like is that I bring it to the spotlight. For example, the moment that you heard about it, you were astonished, like you said, I never heard about it before. So I'm kind of like digging those stories and I bring it forward to more people to be aware of. And usually in my work, there's a lot of ecological undertones. And I think it's very relevant, especially to the time we're living in, especially with climate change and the way that power systems are controlling the ecological narrative.
And what I find interesting is also because this year edition is about stretching definition of design.
Yeah.
You particularly chose, I would say, the world or the language of design, and not specifically of art. Is there a distinction for you, the both worlds? And why did you choose for the design world in that sense?
Well, it's actually interesting that because, of course, also I think in the design world, there's a lot of discussion of what is design and what is art. We're always questioning that from both sides, from art world and from the design world.
True, yes.
And again, it's about stretching borders. And it's kind of a liquid borders already, I think. I don't think there should be rules what is what. Of course, when we talk about design in more like let's say the bare minimum, we say, oh, it's a chair you can sit on. It's something that solves a problem. But what happens when the solution is more meta? It's not about physical attributes, but it's more about thought-provoking or designing a thought experiment, for example, with speculative design.
Talking about the metamorphosis, also another one of your work. Yeah, thank you for. Maybe you can explain also then in that sense, what do you consider yourself as in design-wise, your role in regard to, I would say, the outer world?
Mm-hmm. Well, again, I'm really, some people will kill me about it, but I don't think designers should should have the heavy weight of solving all the problems in the world. Sometimes we are maybe facing those kind of notions from the public. Yeah, you need to solve climate crisis, you need to solve social problems. I don't come from that area of design. There are beautiful projects and people are really doing great changes in the world, but I don't believe that we're here to necessarily solve all the problems. Sometimes people call me pessimistic, but I think I'm more critical. And I try to separate between who I am as a person, as a personal human being, my own agendas, and also my design way. So I feel that I don't want to force ideas, but I want to present them in a neutral way and provoke this curiosity also in other people.
Also to enhance and maybe in that sense of critical thinking.
Exactly, exactly. That's the idea of critical design.
Nice. But I also hear you're tapping also into different kind of disciplines. Art
Definitely.
is present, fashion. You also work with big brands like Balenciaga.
For example, yes.
Why did you choose actually these, I would say, more the commercial world or other disciplines? Because yeah, you are tapping into different kind of languages in that sense.
Actually, well, I would say that I didn't choose it; they chose me. So that was also, I think, very interesting to see how those big brands and those very commercial companies they're actually combine or collaborate with designers that are not, let's say, yeah, the traditional way of design. So they really care about storytelling right now. And especially, I think Balenciaga, for me, it was a great collaboration because Demna, which is the head designer of Balenciaga, he really moved the brand from traditional haute couture to very narrative-based fashion. And yeah, for me, those kind of collaborations are beautiful because then we can change what people perceive about those big brands, about those companies. Not only just say, oh, we're being sustainable, we do greenwashing, because the word sustainability became very, very overused and it lost its value. And I think the moment that big brands are actually collaborating with designers that are more critical, that they have new views about the world, new views about consumerism, about values, that's the moment when things start to be interesting.
And do you envision more collaborations also regard to bigger brands?
Definitely. I think that's one of my wishes for the coming years.
Nice. I'm really looking forward to it because I think these cross-pollination regards to different kind of disciplines, especially from the arts, design, and towards, say, the commercial world, I think we're seeing this so much more. So I'm looking forward to this and looking forward in regards to your work. What will we see during the Glue edition and where? Will it be located, your work?
So I'm part of the Radmakers Gallery. That's the location. And actually, they're going to start with an exhibition called Waste. It starts from August and it's going to end in November. And part of it will be part of Glue. And I'm going to show my work, Metamorphism, which speculates about how basically plastic waste will get digested by the natural systems of geology and become a new material in the future. So it's questioning what is natural, what is not, but also the value of materials. And let's say maybe it will be the new marble in the future. So I really worked in it in kind of a craftsmanship kind of way. So really very physical, a little bit how we use ceramics, or how we used to use ceramics in very primitive methodologies. And that's what I'm going to show.
Well, I'm really looking forward actually to your work, the exhibitions, and I think there will be many more to showcase and also to see. But thank you for joining us for the Glue edition. Thank you for your wonderful story here in our interview.
Thank you
very
for
much.
having me.